Story credited to David Armstrong. You know when you get that gut feeling? The kind of feeling that something's just off? Well, I ignored mine. And it's probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. A couple of weeks ago, I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, just killing time. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but then this listing popped up, a brand new bike, never used, for $75. Now, I've been biking for years, and I know that a bike like this would easily go for a few $100, maybe more. So yeah, it seemed a little too good to be true. But I'm an optimist, I guess. I messaged the seller. The guy's name was Todd Peterson. His profile picture was pretty normal, a middle-aged dude with a baseball cap, probably mid-40s. He replied right away, said he had just moved and didn't have space for the bike anymore. His tone seemed genuine, and he even mentioned how he'd feel better if someone who really liked biking got it. He said he lived about 40 minutes from me in a small town I'd never heard of. I don't usually drive that far for anything, but like I said, I ignored that gut feeling. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? It's a small town, people are generally friendly, right? That was mistake number one. I headed out late in the afternoon. The drive was mostly uneventful, a lot of farmland, a few small houses, but as I got closer to the address Todd had given me, the roads got narrower, and the houses seemed further apart. Eventually, I found the house, a small rundown place with chipped paint and a yard that hadn't been mowed in ages. There was no car in the driveway, and for some reason, that felt odd to me. Who doesn't have a car out here? I parked on the street and shot him a quick text. "Hey, I'm here." A minute later, he responded, "Come around back, I'm not stupid. I've seen enough sketchy situations to know that this wasn't a good sign." But again, I shrugged it off. Maybe his front door was broken. Maybe he had a dog or something he didn't want me to startle. I tried to be logical about it, plus it was still daylight. I figured if something weird happened, I could just leave. I walked around to the backyard, and that's when things started to feel wrong. There was this weird quiet. You know, not like peaceful quiet, but like everything had stopped. No birds, no wind, just dead silence. The backyard was even more run down than the front. A rusty old swing set, a couple of broken lawn chairs, and this shed that looked like it was about to collapse. Todd wasn't outside. I stood there for a second, scanning the yard, waiting for him to show up. Finally, the back door creaked open, and there he was, standing in the doorway. He looked different than his picture, a little older, scruffier. His face was drawn, like he hadn't slept in days. "You the guy for the bike?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound casual. He nodded. "It's in the shed." Now at this point, every alarm bell in my head was going off. Why would the bike be in the shed? Why wouldn't he have it ready out front, or at least in the yard? I was starting to sweat, even though it wasn't that hot out. But instead of trusting my instincts, I followed him. That was mistake number 2. The shed was small, barely big enough to fit the bike. Todd pushed open the door, and I saw it right away, leaned up against the back wall. It looked exactly like the picture, brand new, sleek, and perfect. But there was something else in there. I could barely make it out in the shadows, but it looked like tools. Not normal tools, though. These were weird, rusted, dirty, like they hadn't been used for actual work in a long time. I hesitated, standing just outside the shed, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. Todd turned to me, and I swear to God his eyes were different, darker, like he was sizing me up. "You gonna take a look at the bike or what?" he asked, his voice low. I took a step back, trying to play it cool. "You know what, man? I think I'm good. It's a great bike, but I didn't bring enough cash with me. I'll have to pass." His face didn't change. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just stared at me as if he was trying to figure out what to do next. "You sure?" he asked, taking a step closer to me. "Yeah," I said, my voice cracking just a little. "I'm sure." I turned to leave, but before I could take more than a couple of steps, I heard him move behind me. That's when I felt it. This cold, creeping dread crawling up my spine. I didn't wait to see what he was doing, I just ran. Full sprint out of the yard, around the side of the house, and back to my car. When I slammed the door shut and locked it, I looked back at the house. Todd was standing in the doorway, watching me. Just standing there. He didn't come after me. He didn't shout. He just stood there staring as I peeled out of the driveway. I didn't stop driving until I was back on the highway, my heart racing the whole way home. When I got back, I checked Facebook Marketplace again. Todd's listing was gone. His profile, deleted, like he never existed. To this day, I still don't know what his plan was. Maybe he was just messing with me, trying to scare me, or maybe it was something much worse. But every time I think about it, I get that feeling in my gut again. That same feeling I ignored when I first saw the listing. And now, whenever I scroll through Marketplace looking for deals, I always remember one thing. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Story 2 credited to Matthew Owens. You ever get that feeling like you're making a decision that'll probably come back to haunt you, but you just push forward anyway? Yeah, that's exactly how I felt the moment I hit send on that last message. It started a couple of weeks ago. I just moved into a new place, smaller than my last apartment, but hey, it's cheaper, and it's closer to work. Anyway, the one thing I was missing was a decent coffee table. So, like any broke adult, I hit up Facebook Marketplace. You know the drill, scrolling through listings, most of them either overpriced or just straight up junk. But then I found it, a solid oak coffee table for $30. It looked perfect. In the pictures, the table seemed legit, no scratches, nice wood finish. I figured it was either a steal or someone who just wanted to get rid of it fast. The seller's name was Jason Larkin. Profile pic showed a guy in his mid-30s wearing a baseball cap and holding a beer. Seemed normal enough. He was quick to respond too, telling me he was moving to a different state and just needed to get rid of some stuff. He even offered to throw in a couple of end tables for free. That should have been the first red flag, right? But I thought, maybe the guy just didn't want to deal with hauling it all across the country. So I agreed to meet up and pick up the table. He gave me an address on the edge of town, not far from where I live, about a 20-minute drive. I figured, worst case scenario, it's a little sketchy and I just walk away, no harm done. The day of the pickup was your typical fall day. Gray skies, a light drizzle coming down, and the kind of cold that just makes you want to stay inside. But I was committed, so I got in my car and drove. As I got closer to the address, things started to feel off. You know those areas where the houses are spread out, not a lot of street lights, and everything just feels a little too quiet? That's where I ended up. The house was at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by trees. It wasn't run down, but it had that no one's really lived here for a while look. The lawn was overgrown, the windows had this layer of grime, and the whole place gave me a weird vibe. Still, I parked my car and texted Jason, letting him know I was there. He replied, "Cool, door's open, just head inside, table's in the living room." That's when I hesitated. The door's open? What kind of person just leaves their door unlocked for a complete stranger? But again, I shrugged it off. Maybe he was busy packing or whatever. I wasn't about to turn down a $30 coffee table because I was feeling sketched out. So, I walked up to the house and sure enough, the front door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open a bit more and stepped inside, calling out, "Hello? Jason?" No response. The place was dark, even though it was still early afternoon. The air smelled musty, like the house hadn't been aired out in weeks. I could hear the faint sound of the rain tapping against the windows. "Jason," I called again, louder this time. I took a few steps into the living room, expecting to see the coffee table, but there was nothing. No furniture, no boxes, nothing that made it look like someone was moving out. Just an empty room. That's when I heard it, a faint sound coming from down the hall. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me freeze. It sounded like whispering, or maybe a TV on low volume, I couldn't quite tell. But here's the thing, there was no TV in the living room and there definitely weren't any lights on. Now every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. But I couldn't just leave without at least checking, right? I mean, what if he was in the back packing stuff up or something? Maybe he didn't hear me. I took a deep breath and walked down the hall. The whispering got louder. I don't know why, but I knocked on the first door I came to. I knocked as if that was going to make the situation any less weird. "Jason, you in there?" The whispering stopped. I'm not proud of this, but I felt my hands shaking a little. I slowly pushed the door open and nothing. The room was completely empty, just like the living room. No furniture, no boxes, nothing. Just bare walls and a window covered in dust. I was done. I didn't care about the coffee table anymore, I just wanted out. I turned back toward the front door, ready to leave, when I saw it. Something was standing at the end of the hallway. It wasn't Jason. It was a man, about my height, wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up. He was standing completely still, facing me, but I couldn't see his face in the shadows. I froze. My throat went dry, and for a second I couldn't move. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, blocking the hallway like he was waiting for me to do something. My heart was racing now. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the back of the house, disappearing into the shadows of another room. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted down the hall, threw open the front door, and sprinted to my car. My hands were shaking so bad that I could barely get the keys into the ignition. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him standing in the doorway, watching me leave. But the house just sat there, silent and empty, as if nothing had happened. I drove straight home and immediately blocked Jason on Facebook. I reported the listing too, but here's the thing. When I went to check his profile later, it was gone. Not just blocked, gone, like it never existed. No history, no messages, nothing. I don't know what I saw in that house. I don't know who that guy was or why he was there. But I do know this. No piece of furniture is worth that feeling. If you ever get that gut feeling that something's wrong, trust it, because sometimes things aren't just off for no reason. Story 3 credited to Daniel Fisher. I've bought plenty of things online, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp. Most of the time it's totally fine. Sometimes though, you get a weird vibe from the seller. This story? This was way more than a weird vibe. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had just moved into a new apartment in Chicago and I needed some furniture, fast. I found this couch on Facebook Marketplace. It was a simple brown leather couch. Nothing fancy, but it looked like it was in good shape. And the price was perfect. Only $50. The seller's name was Greg Martin. His profile picture was of some beach. No photo of him, which I thought was a little odd, but not a red flag or anything. His messages were super short, like, "Still available?" and "Pick up tonight." That's about all he said. He sent me his address, which was in a part of the city I wasn't super familiar with. I Googled it, and it was a decent neighborhood, so I figured, why not? I got off work around 6:30 that night and headed straight there. The address was in this residential area, a little outside the main city, where the houses were spread out and the roads got darker. I remember thinking, this is way quieter than I'm used to. When I got to the house, it didn't look like a typical place where you'd find someone selling furniture online. The house itself wasn't run down or anything, but it was definitely empty looking. The windows were dark, and the only light came from the porch, a single dim bulb above the door. It felt odd. I parked on the street right out front and sent him a message to let him know I was there. He didn't reply right away, which was fine, I thought. Maybe he's busy. I got out of my car and walked up to the porch, still hoping this would just be a quick transaction. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I knocked again, still nothing. I checked my phone, no new messages. I should have left right then and there, but the couch was supposed to be right there and I didn't want to waste my time, so I knocked again, louder this time. Finally, after what felt like forever, the door opened just a crack. I saw a man's face peek out from the shadows. He was older than I expected, probably mid-50s, with unshaven stubble and sunken eyes. "Greg?" I asked. He nodded, barely opening the door wider. "I'm here for the couch?" He stared at me for a second too long, then said, "Come in. It's in the back." Every instinct in my body screamed to turn around and leave, but I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe it was that awkward pressure, not wanting to seem rude or overly cautious. So I stepped inside. The inside of the house felt wrong. It was cluttered, but not in a messy way. More like everything had been abandoned halfway through a move. There were half-packed boxes in the corner, an old dusty rug on the floor, and no furniture except for a single wooden chair in the hallway. There were no pictures on the walls, no decorations, nothing to make the place feel lived in. and there was this smell, kind of musty, like a mix of old wood and something metallic. Greg didn't say much as he led me through the house. I kept glancing around, trying to make small talk. Nice place, or been here long? But he didn't respond. He just kept walking, his footsteps heavy and slow. The further we went, the more uneasy I got. Finally, we reached a back room. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see the couch inside. Relief washed over me. It looked exactly like the picture. "There it is," he said in a low voice, standing in the doorway. I nodded, stepping into the room to get a closer look. It was a decent size, and for $50 it was a steal. I bent down to check the legs, making sure they weren't wobbly or damaged. That's when I noticed it. On the far side of the couch, just out of view when you first walk in, was a large dark stain on the carpet. It was the size of a small puddle, deep red, almost brown. My brain immediately jumped to wine. It's gotta be wine, right? But it didn't look like a spilled drink. The shape was too uneven, too organic. I stood up slowly, glancing back at Greg, who was still standing in the doorway, watching me. He hadn't moved since I walked in, and now that I looked at him again, I realized how pale he was. There was something off about the way he was just standing there, like he was waiting for something. "So, what's the story with this couch?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Belonged to a friend," he said, his voice cold and flat. I nodded, but my heart was racing. I didn't want to turn my back on him, but I didn't want to keep standing there either. Something was wrong, I knew it. My mind was spinning, trying to figure out a way to leave without making it obvious that I was freaked out. "You need help moving it?" Greg asked suddenly, his voice a little too eager. I shook my head quickly. No, I can get it. Thanks though, I've got a buddy waiting outside to help me load it." That was a lie. I was alone. But I hoped it would make him think twice about trying anything. His expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. He was thinking about it. I grabbed one end of the couch, pretending to be busy, but I kept my eyes on him. My mind was racing, planning my next move. If I could just get to the door, I'd be fine. But then, he stepped forward, blocking the exit. "You're lying," he said softly. His eyes locked onto mine, and I froze. My stomach dropped. I tried to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other in this awful silence. Then, in one quick movement, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a long, thin knife. I didn't think, I just acted. I let go of the couch, pushing it toward him as hard as I could, and bolted for the door. I didn't look back. I could hear him stumbling over the couch behind me, cursing under his breath. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might burst. I ran down the hallway, through the front door, and straight to my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, but I managed to get in and lock the doors. I could see Greg standing on the porch, watching me with that same cold expression, the knife still in his hand. I didn't wait. I sped off, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard they hurt. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, back in the city, where the streets were busy and full of life. Only then did I pull over, my body shaking uncontrollably. I never reported Greg. I deleted the messages, blocked him on Facebook, and tried to forget the whole thing. But I'll never forget the look in his eyes, the way he stood there, waiting. I've never used Facebook Marketplace since, and I never will.